On today's podcast, we're thrilled to welcome Brianna Schwartz and Alexis Schreiber, the dynamic duo behind the forward-thinking law firm of Schwartz and Schreiber. With a passion for music and the law, Brianna and Alexis discuss the radical transformations in the music industry and how they are bridging the gap between artists and legal counsel. With insights into streaming, contract innovations, and the revolutionary impact of technologies like AI and blockchain, this conversation is essential for anyone navigating today's rapidly evolving music business landscape. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. Today, we have a riveting discussion planned for you. Join us as we dive into the dynamic world of music law with two pioneering forces in the industry, Brianna Schwartz and Alexis Schreiber. Together, they've built a very distinctive law firm that champions an innovative, artist-centric approach to legal representation, addressing the gaps that exist between attorneys and their talented clients. In this episode, we'll uncover how Brianna and Alexis are transforming the legal landscape in music by utilizing three core principles: a holistic big picture approach, individualized client engagement, and the pursuit of passion. We'll explore the booming shift in music deals in the age of streaming and how artists today are leveraging platforms like Patreon and Discord to bypass traditional gatekeepers, and what pitfalls to watch out for along the way. And you won't want to miss their insights on future trends impacting the industry, from AI to blockchain, and the vital role of trademarks for artists. Even hear their tips for those just starting out on their musical journey. Get ready for a conversation packed with practical advice, industry secrets, and inspiration for every aspiring artist. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders! Are you an aspiring musician, artist, band, or future music business professional looking to take your career to the next level? Well, look no further. At MUBUTV, we offer personalized career counseling and coaching designed specifically for folks like you.
Imagine having both of us by your side, guiding you through every step of your music journey. Our sessions are tailored to meet your unique needs, focusing on critical aspects of your music career, such as refining your songs, defining your artist story, identifying your target audience, and enhancing your social media presence, just to name a few.
Whether you're just starting out or looking to elevate your existing career, we've got you covered. Our comprehensive approach ensures you get insights on everything from live shows to branding and marketing strategies. We understand that every artist is unique. That's why our coaching is personalized just for you.
And here's the best part. We offer flexible coaching packages that fit any budget. Choose from individual sessions ranging from 30 to 90 minutes, or save with our discounted 4-session packages. Experience custom sessions designed to enhance your music career, with opportunities for greater savings when you choose bundled sessions. Investing in your musical journey has never been more accessible.
Imagine the clarity and direction you'll gain after just one session, the feedback on your songs, the strategies to grow your audience, and the confidence to perform live, all tailored just for you.
So why wait? Don't let uncertainty hold you back. Join us for your free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com for a transformative coaching experience that will elevate your music career. That's book.mubutv.com.
Hi, this is Lionel Lodge. I'm CEO and co-founder of Sync Lodge, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guests are the incredible dynamic legal team of Brianna Schwartz and Alexis Schreiber from the law firm Schwartz and Schreiber. This was a fascinating conversation, Eric, and for many reasons. Number one, these are two very, very innovative thinking women who have really identified some very interesting points of what works and what doesn't work in the legal profession of representation of artists, and have really addressed them. I thought one of the most fascinating aspects of our conversation with Brianna and Alexis was their holistic approach. You know, their firm focuses on a very holistic approach in terms of representation. They look at contract scenarios in relation to an artist's long-term vision and leveraging the entire context rather than just the contract's face value. This is fascinating because what that says And why I think it's so important is that today in 2025, the context of what they were talking about is that an artist themselves has to have a vision.
Right.
It's not just get me a deal.
Yeah.
Well, who are we getting a deal for?
Right.
There's a holistic look at what they are representing. It's not just a deal. It's what do you want to do? What are you about? Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years?
Right.
And you have to have answers to these questions in terms of what they were talking about. That's what I thought was so fascinating about that approach, is that it wasn't just, next,
Yeah.
cookie cutter legal representation.
And if you're going after a deal, you better know the answer to these questions prior to that. We talk about the storytelling and all those different elements. One of the other areas that I thought was really important, and this goes for everybody that's starting, whether you're starting, intermediate, or advanced in your career that are listening to this right now, but treating your music career as a business. It's crucial for artists to treat their music careers as businesses, complete with structured teams and strategic decisions. They really shared a wealth of knowledge in this, and this is a big one because artists that are starting out don't think of their career as a business, or might not even have had that concept come into their mind. But unfortunately, we are our products and we are our brands. And so with that, you have to treat this like a business, and that's doing all the necessary paperwork, whether it's filling out trademarks for your name as an artist or a band, songwriting splits, which we talked about before in past episodes, making sure that all of these things are wrapped up nicely in a bow. So when you go to that next step of your career, you have the foundation of what you need in order to succeed.
Absolutely. And you said it perfectly. It's about thinking of your career as a business. That's crucial.
And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Brianna Schwartz and Alexis Schreiber.
Brianna, Alexis, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's so great having you guys on the show. The music industry has undergone such a radical transformation in how artists not only create and distribute their work, but also in the legal framework that governs their careers. And this demands, I think, probably a much more dynamic and artist-centric approach to legal representation. My question to you guys, Brianna and Alexis, is that you have both spoken about forming your firm after recognizing a disconnect in how attorneys and clients typically work together. My question is twofold. What did you feel was missing in those relationships, and how does your approach bridge that gap?
Yeah, so Brianna here, I'll take this one. We were seeing and finding from, speaking to artists and business people in this space that a lot of the issues that they were having or are having with legal counsel, and I think this is a tale as old as time, is that contracts are being negotiated, deals are being closed, but the terms are not being explained, and the outcome of what this contract actually means is not being explained to the client, because lawyers do their thing, and we talk to other lawyers and we negotiate on behalf of our clients. And a lot of times especially when you're dealing with big law firms or big companies, we even on this when dealing with counsel at major labels who are negotiating on behalf of the label, that a lot of times there's disconnect in what the A&R rep actually wanted from, the artist that we're repping on our end and how that deal should look. And so a lot of the disconnect there is really just, that human connection of let's sit down and talk shop and be partners and talk about what you're trying to do, because a deep deal for one artist may be very different than what that deal should be for another artist, depending on their vision for themselves, their leverage in the scenario. And so while a lot of attorneys sometimes look at deals on their face, meaning what does the document actually say, what we really try to do is look at the scenario super holistically and understand that while this deal may be really good for bad for this artist on the other side of the coin because of their scenario and what they envision for themselves over the next 6 months to a year to 3 years to 5 years.
Alexis and Brianna, thank you so much. This is Eric. Thank you so much for doing this. We're really excited to have you on the show. I wanted to ask you, you guys have stated that the 3 guiding principles of Schwartz and Schreiber are, number 1, immersing ourselves in our client's world. Number 2, a holistic big picture approach. And number 3, seeking out of dedication and passion. This, I would imagine, requires you to be very, very selective in your partnerships. Tell us what you look for in a client you're looking to represent.
So we look for a number of things. Thanks, Eric. This is Alexis. It's really dependent on the situation. We really enjoy representing on both sides of the industry. So, of course, our whole passion started out being music lovers ourselves and being really excited about representing and helping artists develop their career. But as we got into it, we also found a big passion and a big interest in representing on the label side and on the business side. So, record labels, publishers, production companies, sync houses, all these kind of new developing and independents on that side of the business as well, because it also helped us be able to represent artists on a better scale and kind of know where the negotiation points are, know what works for, the business side as well as the artist side, and what we can kind of do to make it work for both parties. And that's kind of been very exciting for us to find that passion on the business side as well. So for us, it is really about finding artists that we love, finding things that we love to do, because then it doesn't so much feel like work as it does, doing something you're excited about, but also being able to create that value and, help clients and help businesses grow along the way. So it's a really exciting space, and we love being in it and, representing on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, that also makes the work, I think, more interesting. And from a sort of a holistic view, would give you guys both an understanding of, client and, the person who you're negotiating with, so that you do have an understanding of what, labels and the other side wants, as well as what an artist wants as well. So that's a great balance.
Right. And we love it gives us the opportunity too to take risks on artists and kind of, negotiate with them and help them start their career off, even though they may not be able to and necessarily start out with legal counsel off the bat. And so it kind of gives us flexibility there to help artists and grow.
Exactly. Let me ask you, with streaming dominating music consumption, traditional contracts and revenue structures have had to evolve as well. Today, I think there are no sort of standard record deals per se. There's more innovation depending on your genre, leverage, track record. Today, artists are in charge of building their own leverage. And so my question to you guys is, what are some of the most significant shifts you've seen in how artists structure various deals?
Yeah, I mean, Brianna here. This is something that we talk about all the time. We see, record label deals from like the super independent, and then we also see the majors as well. And one of the terms that is really interesting and evolving, and, even from 4 years ago when we first opened our practice to prior to that just being in the industry, and to now, like, the shift is happening so quickly, where back when it was like, everything was PPD from a royalty standpoint. And you were seeing mostly that. And then you started seeing like a combination of that. And sometimes it was starting to, recalculate PPD into what would that mean in a net profit deal. And then from there, it's like now you're barely seeing out a lot is that the artist will come to us, say, I want, this many points, not understanding that if they didn't have a lawyer explaining to them that calculation on a net receipts basis would actually really screw them over, because when you're talking PPD, for those of you who don't know, we're talking, you take home a percentage of the retail price of the so-called album sale, single sale, or whatever it might be back in the day. That conversion to now net receipts, when you're deducting marketing expenses and promo and all of that stuff, is a very different calculation. So understanding, I think, like where the market is and what type of label you're dealing with, and like you were saying, the artist is super important in trying to formulate a proper royalty percentage in a deal. And I think like there's no one size fits all for this. It's really important to analyze the holistic scenario there.
And let me ask you just another sub question to that. Are you still seeing, and you don't have to name names obviously of the companies or anything, but are you still seeing the deals structured with physical goods? Is that still part of the equation? Even though there isn't like such a thing as physical goods anymore?
Yeah, it's really wild because the legal industry as a whole is antiquated in the way, like you're seeing contracts like reflect after the fact.
Right.
And yes, so like as crazy as it sounds, yes, we are seeing physical calculations being inputted into these deals. I actually recently reviewed 2 Sony deals side by side for subsidiaries of Sony, and both of them had an entire section on physical sales. And like it's like you have attention to it in the event that, vinyl it takes this mass resurgence, which we know it's taking, sort of a resurgence at this point. But like in the event that something comes up, you want to look at everything. But it is pretty wild because I think technology is moving a lot quicker than the legal industry during that and how to articulate that into a contract. And so I do see it as a problem because, like I said, it's like you're talking a percentage of a physical sale is very different than a percentage of the net receipts that are collected from streaming platforms.
Well, I also think that it's just the way these contracts have been done. They're monster documents, and sometimes it's really hard to revamp them. So I think it's been, an industry problem as a whole is sometimes they're just not revamped the way that they should be. So I think that's something that we definitely want to be a part of the change and, change the way that these contracts are drafted so that they're more easy to understand. They're, the terms are more clear and more relevant to the way that music moves today and the industry today rather than the way it was 20 years ago.
So let me ask you, many artists are now bypassing traditional gatekeepers by monetizing directly through platforms like Patreon, OnlyFans, and Discord. My question is twofold for you guys. How does this shift change the legal considerations for artists? And what are some of the most common pitfalls they should avoid when managing their own fan communities?
Well, so I think that it's super important for artists to be aware that building out these types of, fan bases that they have a lot more control over. This is kind of a new phenomenon and like a very exciting one for artists because they're able to have more control over bringing people in, who they're reaching, and it can give them negotiation leverage. So I think that that's a really important point because we hear it all the time. It's like, oh, well, this artist has this many followers, so maybe they have a little bit more leverage in this scenario. And that's very exciting because it is a shift in that way. And they're able to kind of ask for different terms and say like, hey, I can, pull these people into touring. So maybe the certain deal terms are more favorable. And that is a very, very important thing. But I think, to that same point, the pitfalls could be that a lot of these things are moving so quickly and developing. And like all of a sudden there's TikTok. Now there's no TikTok. And then there's going to be something else maybe that replaces it. And it's really hard to foresee all of these scenarios and put it all in a contract. So like now we're seeing things, like even as silly as this sounds, in a territory. So it used to be like, you put the world as the territory.
Right.
Then we started seeing the universe as the territory.
Right.
Now we're seeing the metaverse as the territory.
Wow.
So it's like things that like seriously, it's actually like an interesting thing because it's like, well, if the territory is the world, does that include the metaverse? Like, could you enter into a different, it's all these questions that have not yet been addressed.
Right.
And, they have implications because at the end of the day, like that agreement is what you're looking back on if there's a problem. And if it's not addressed, like it's there,
and let me ask you a question. Let's say you get an artist that's going to get ready, like they said, they're going to sign to a major, let's say. When they sign that deal, and, we're talking about the idea of the fan communities and how important it is in this question that we asked you earlier. My question to you is, are you seeing deals structured? And I don't know how that part of it works. When they get signed to the deal, are they required to turn in like all of their fan information to the label? Because I do notice that you'll see switches with certain artists that maybe had not been signed before. And then you can see that it's coming like through Universal Music. You start seeing their whole mailing list going through Universal. Can you explain that in more detail? Because I think it would be curious to know that.
Yeah.
That is, yes. So we see that a lot, like I said, in the major label deals. And that's all heavily negotiated. So I wouldn't say that like you have to hand over everything and you have to hand over your websites and your accounts and all that. And that was actually a provision that was heavily negotiated in that deal I was handling in both of them, and two very different outcomes because of the leverage of the artist there. So, Sony wanted the rights to take over their website and fully control the website and actually own the IP behind the website and to push sales through the website, and that they couldn't have any other artist website. And so that was a provision that we went back and forth on a multitude of times and ended up landing on they could have a website that pushes the records that are being released during the term of the contract, but they didn't have exclusive rights to this artist's, name, image, and likeness, and they didn't have the exclusive right to control a website, because we've heard from people on the tech side of music that it's a massive mistake to hand over those rights to labels in full, because most of the time they are not actually doing the extent of what they could be doing.
Exactly.
And so like, while this like, yeah, it's like there's these new, there's, tech companies now for everything and to find every little nuance to help you push your business forward. So it's almost like it's become like an entrepreneur's world, like in this artist space where it's like, you can't just go to one big company and expect them to do everything for you. Like, yeah, great. A label can help you market and help you get your stuff out there, help you get playlisted, whatever it might be. But then like, you might want to go to the tech expert and have them help, push on. And again, I'm not a tech person, so excuse my ignorance on the technical side of the language here, but they could help, push the SEO behind the site. And there's the metadata, there's so much more that you could do there. So that's actually a very interesting question because it does come up and it's really not discussed until it's in the contract.
Right. Because I would have to imagine if an artist, let's say they're like a mid-level and they've got a few 100,000 subscribers, let's say just on their YouTube channel, I can see why the label wants to take that from them because of course they're monetizing all the content. So if they're putting out those videos on that channel that's got, 500,000 subscribers, that's stuff that they're monetizing because clearly they can't monetize anymore on physical goods as we know, or any music. It's basically free. So I see, I was very curious about how that was structured into the deals, but it's interesting to see that that's something that's negotiable.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like as YouTube and all these user generated content platforms become like more of the norm and where massive revenue is being generated, it should be a highly negotiated aspect of the contract for sure.
So the data aspect of it, as you were mentioning, I think data is king, as a lot of these, labels know. The more data they have on users, on fans, on everyone, the better. So it is definitely something that they're looking to obtain from artists.
Yeah, what's so interesting in listening to both of your answers on Eric's question is it makes me realize that, artists, and you guys know this from your profession, but artists themselves, do you feel that artists today need to view their career in music as a business? Which is a different kind of consciousness than most artists have. But as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, this is something that's very, very important to understanding if this is to be their career. I mean, do you feel that artists need to be doing that? Okay, can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking to the essence of, and I think you touched on this before in regard to like what we kind of, speak on when we're explaining our firm to artists and businesses and whatnot. It's essentially that at the end of the day, and artists don't like to hear this, but you won't make it these days unless you treat yourself like a business. And that goes down to forming an LLC and ensuring that you have a proper entity supporting your infrastructure, to ensuring that you have a team around you, because these days, like, sure, you can make it big independently and you can, have a viral hit and whatnot. But the artists that we're seeing that are really consistently growing and like actually taking it to the next level have a team around them. They have a manager, they have an attorney, they have a business manager when it's time to handle their money and ensure that they're dealing with that stuff properly. Because if you have a massive, payment and you don't know how to handle your money, and then you can't sustain yourself for the next year because you now, blew your money on clothes and a new apartment and whatever it might be, then you don't have that money to reinvest into the business and to help produce content for your next release, to hire the producers that you need to help with, the music. And so it really, like, forming an infrastructure around yourself is super important. And understanding, and actually we were listening to some of your podcasts, and I think it's something that you guys briefly touched on, but understanding that sometimes you do have to put out what the fans want to hear, and that's business strategy. You might not artistically want to do that, but you might need to make that move in order to get this specific show or to get this booking. And so it really is more than just art, unfortunately, these days. But I think there are enough people on the business side of the industry and the legal side of the industry who care enough to protect that art and say, how can we help you do what you do, but like teach you that we need to run this strategically and treat this as a business model.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you guys, AI is quickly affecting so many areas of the music industry, and its impact, varies. What would you say are the biggest challenges and opportunities for artists, labels, and publishers moving forward? And do these vary with different genres of music?
Definitely. Yeah, there's so much opportunity out there. We're constantly seeing new platforms that are able to do very cool things with music. And all of a sudden you're able to create 7 songs in the time it would have taken you to create 1. And it's a very exciting realm out there on both the artist and the business side. Of course, for artists, it's, we have this question all the time where it's kind of like, oh, like I used this platform. Am I okay? Like, is there any legal repercussions? And so it's very interesting because we've been having to read a lot of terms and, website kind of content to see what the implications are of the use of that. And of course, we always say the copyright rates and like the actual legal structure is not quite set up to handle that. Like they're still very new, and just the way the law works where it's kind of like it's written and then there's precedent sent by courts through lawsuits and things like that. Like that's all so new, and it takes time, and like everything's developing so quickly in the meantime that it's changing as it's being precedents being set. So it's just kind of a wild circle that's happening. And so we almost say all the time that it's like almost the music industry professionals and the people in the industry now that are setting the tone for it. So the advice that we give our artists is always, make sure that there is plenty of human contribution to it, because if you use straight just AI, you're going to have a problem with copyright, because that's kind of where it is right now. If it's solely technology or AI that creates the music, there's copyright protection problems. And also just to make sure that there's a name, image, and likeness component. For labels and the business side, it's a huge opportunity, because all of a sudden you can have this artist's voice, on 50 different songs when like they're just one person. They can only be in, so many sessions and all this. So it maximizes that potential that you have as a label. But at the same time, it's like preserving that artist's brand and person. And so a lot of that is being handled now preemptively, and contracts kind of saying like, hey, this is the use that I'm approving. This is what I need approval over, because there's all these things that are coming out, and it's a very exciting opportunity on both ends. There's a lot of potential revenue maximization on the business side and also on the artist side, but there's definitely safeguards that need to be in place, and it's sometimes difficult to foresee what can happen, but it's an exciting place to kind of be learning and adding as we go.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Eric, as an artist, what do you find are the most challenging aspects to a music career, especially when you're starting out?
Well, I think one of the first things is just trying to get the direction of who you are as an artist, where you want to go, where you want to be. And, we've talked about it on the show a lot. Who is your target audience? Who you are? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What do you think would resonate with an audience? And so those are some of the things that I would feel being a new artist. Obviously, what I know now is different because I know these things, but for people that are out there like our audience that don't have necessarily any direction to go would be the first things that I would start off with.
And having the songs that
Absolutely.
Incorporate those elements that you're speaking of into it. That's so important today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we started MUBUTV and why we started this new consulting service that we're offering to all of our insiders out there, because that is another one of the big things. I mean, that is the big thing, is like having the great songs. That's what it really starts off. Our friend Don Grierson always said, it always starts with a great song. So that's probably, besides putting together what your audience and what your target audience is the single most important thing. Where are your songs at currently today? Are you collaborating with people? Are you trying to go out to networking events where you can connect with other songwriters and stuff like that? So
yeah, and what are your strengths?
Exactly.
Are you a strong lyric writer? Are you a strong melody writer? Are you a strong musician, a player?
Right.
And it's really important to get really strong clarity on those issues before proceeding.
I totally agree, Rich. And, with our consulting services, we offer a myriad of different packages and we've made it super affordable for everybody. So, if you guys are interested out there in connecting with us on a coaching call, you can visit book.mubutv.com and start off with a free 15-minute discovery call.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We start with an initial 15-minute call where we can get a sense of who you are, what are the issues that you specifically have, and want to work on.
Exactly.
And we can go from there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we tailor everything to your needs. It's not like a cookie cutter thing. We kind of really want to get to know who you are as an artist, where you at today, what's the snapshot of you as an artist today, and then start trying to craft something that's tailor-made for you. So again, if you're interested, visit us at book.mubutv.com for your 15-minute discovery call.
Yeah, most definitely. And as you guys were just speaking, as you were speaking about this, I was realizing the technology is ahead of the law. Right now, as you pointed out, you cannot copyright an AI
generated song.
Yeah, it's not allowed. I want to ask a question that's related in that same field to you, which is, Web3, blockchain technology, smart contracts. They've all been touted as revolutionary for music rights management and offering transparency and direct payments. Are you seeing the technologies truly make an impact in practice? And what legal considerations should artists keep in mind when navigating these types of opportunities?
Yeah, I think that those are very exciting opportunities. There are kind of like to have contracts and royalties and all that automated and kind of just be done. So it's not like an accounting, because again, as I'm sure you've both seen in a number of industry contracts, there's always accounting provisions where it's like where you have the right to check this and verify, and it's a procedure and all this kind of stuff. So I think that there is a possibility of having these types of contracts and, having it on the blockchain and all that to help eliminate maybe like the guesswork there. And to be honest, though, it's kind of been a slow rollout. We're not seeing that being done a lot. It's still being done pretty manually with, like feature artist agreements and more release documents where it's being done kind of the way that it's been done, more so than it is like, hey, let's put a smart contract in place. So I do think that that's where it's going, and like there's a lot of opportunity there. But on the same, at the same time, there's a lot of gray area where people could get an edge if they understand them better, understand how to program it. And, there's a lot of technology behind it to where like, if you're just agreeing to it and you're not sure how it's being implemented, there just needs to be a lot more understanding, I feel like, to make sure that it's actually being, handled correctly, rather than the old fashioned way.
I wanted to ask you guys, do you advise artists to trademark their artist name, logo, and other brand assets in multiple territories? I would assume the obvious being here in the U.S. first, or maybe even locally in their state, going to the federal trademark. But beyond that, do you guys make those recommendations? Particularly, I would assume artists that are getting ready to sign a major label deal.
Absolutely. We always recommend getting a trademark. The earlier, the better. Sometimes it does take a while for it to go through. So we always advise if you have a name that you really, really like and you're intent on using, or if you're already using it, it's always great to get a trademark for it. We have had situations in the past where artists have gone full out in marketing and usage of the name and really gained a following and a reputation. And then all of a sudden they get a cease and desist letter, or there's somebody else that's using that name prior and they weren't aware of it, didn't trademark it. And then it becomes, oh no, we either have to decide to rebrand and stop usage, or enter into negotiations and potentially pay a lot of money to keep the name. And it gives the initial registrant all of the negotiation power if they want to keep the name. So we definitely advise trying to preempt those types of situations and getting the trademark application in as early as possible, not only for names, but also for any kind of branding elements. So for logos, or we even have artists that have, they start their own labels, or they do some other kind of branding push, whether it be like live shows or festivals, anything like that, and trademarking those names, making sure that the full scope brand has protection will preempt those kinds of issues and situations in the future. It's just being proactive rather than reactive, which we always recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe one of those classes is like class 41 for, for
live performance.
Yeah, for live performance. And I forget what the second one is for your branding and stuff. I mean, only because I know that subject very well, because I've run into problems in the past. And ever since that's happened, and I've become kind of a trademark expert over the years because of some of the issues. So yeah, I totally get it. Yeah.
I've just been thinking as I'm listening to this conversation that we're all having, it makes me realize, there have been so many changes in the music business. And I'm thinking back to how we began our conversation with you, which is the whole, I guess, what we would call philosophical outlook and identifying of what wasn't in the market, which was the inspiration for how the two of you formed your firm. And given that, I guess what I'd love to know is, how do you see the role of music attorneys changing in the next, I'd say 5 years. Let's just go 5 years out. I mean, you guys are on the front lines of this every day. So I'd be curious as to how you see that role changing and evolving.
This is an awesome question because we're seeing this every single day, in the sense that, we have clients that have worked with Big Law, they've worked with, solos, they've worked with they've had 10 plus attorneys throughout their careers. And what they keep coming back to is they want people who are more than just lawyers to them, but they're counselors and or advisors, for a better word. And what that means to them is essentially like, how can they want someone they can collaborate with, talk ideas through. We're getting a lot of like business consulting matters that tie in with legal, in the sense of like, we have, a recording studio that's looking to expand into the record label space. And so he wants to understand how are, record labels structuring singles deals these days, and like, how is this looking? So it's more than just like, hey, can you draft this deal for me? This is what I negotiated. It's, how can you help me see how the markets are shifting, how the trends are changing, and how can you help me, be on top of that? And it's interesting, and I see why they need that support. It's because of everything that we've been talking about here. The industry is moving much more quickly than I think a lot of people can stay on top of. So it's very confusing when, they understood that maybe a deal was structured this way for the last 5 years, and then all of a sudden now there's this shift happening, but they're on, this one singular side of the industry, and they're not seeing this shift all over the space. So as attorneys in our position, where we're seeing deals from independent artists to major artists to, startup businesses to businesses that have been around for many, many years, and different facets of those businesses, we're in the best position to give that advice and to help them understand how, they should structure their businesses and how they can continue structuring deals to keep up with the times.
I wanted to ask this one's for both. I mean, they've all been both for both of you guys, but a question that I have, a lot of our audience is comprised of people that are in different stages of their career, but I would probably say, and Rich would probably agree with me, a lot of beginning artists, indie artists that are just starting out and trying to learn as much as they can about the industry. For those guys that are out there from a legal standpoint, what tips or what, I know what you're going to say, what the first thing you're going to say is, but what would you be telling them that don't have access currently to you guys in terms of like, obviously not signing things, but what other things you can give that are like practical tips that they can use right now?
Well, I have one that's pretty obvious, and I think that you guys are very familiar because you've had him on your podcast, but we love Don Passman's books, and just kind of having those resources and self-educating is always so powerful, because then if you don't have the luxury to pay somebody in order to give you advice or to, say, hey, this is my experience, this is what we know, and I'll let me handle this for you, there is enough that you can do yourself in those very, very beginning stages to at least understand the way that things work and typical structures, things like that. And, he obviously does a phenomenal job of explaining it in layman's terms, what we call it, kind of like a more simple way to understand it than necessarily reading a contract, because sometimes contracts are written just in such a way that most people are not meant to understand them. So definitely find resources. We love podcasts. So, kind of self-education is a big one that we promote.
And also there are, attorneys like ourselves, and there are other attorneys out there who will help developing artists. Even like we've done sessions where the mom of a minor, 12, 13 years old, who's a serious artist and, cultivating his career, wants to ask questions about how to register with Sound Exchange and what's the purpose of the MLC and how does that differ from Harry Fox and what's a PRO and what's the difference between ASCAP and BMI. And I think there are attorneys who are willing to, help developing artists, even if it's just like, hey, let's do an hour consult session and get all your questions ready and we can answer everything you want.
Right.
And so I think that that's really valuable as well, because it is important to understand how all of these different organizations and, things that you have to sign up for and what they mean and why, because at the end of the day, if you're releasing music and you're not collecting on that music that you're releasing, it's like you're doing all this work really not for nothing, but for very little.
Right. And it's going into a black box and you're never going to see that money. This was a perfect segue
Exactly.
to the next question. You guys mentioned the Passman book and, we've had Don on the show, but throughout your lives, have there been any other books besides Don's great book or films or documentaries that you guys have found to be particularly inspiring that you can share with the audience?
Oh, so many. Yeah, that's actually a great question. I'm trying to think of recently. The most recent thing I watched that was more educational for myself than, necessarily. I guess it is pretty inspiring, but it's just interesting. There was a not a documentary, but like a limited series, I guess, on how Spotify was built and, what went into it. I forget the name of it, but it was really interesting because it kind of showed the whole revolution behind how the concept came about and how it was created. And I think that's super interesting, especially now when all these music-based startups and tech companies are coming to the surface here.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. You are the only person I have ever spoken with, and I've spoken to so many people in the music, but nobody saw that. No, I know the documentary.
Really?
It wasn't a documentary. It was like a
No,
4
it's not.
parts. It was
It's
like a whole movie
Yeah.
about the history of Daniel Ek and how he started it and the challenges he faced and the characters and the people behind and his struggles and his.
We'll find that for the show notes and post it on the show notes.
You're absolutely right. It was amazing, and I would have thought that would have been like the talk of every single music business party and everywhere I went. That aired about 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody has seen that. You're the only person I know who's ever seen that, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's
so funny.
such an important.
Yeah, we'll find out what the title is and share it on the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. There's also a book which just came to memory, Music, Money, and Success by Jeff Brayback.
The
and
Brayback
Todd Brayback
brothers,
is an
yes.
awesome,
Yeah, the Brayback brothers. We know them very well. Yeah, really great guys.
awesome book especially on the publishing side of things. It breaks it down pretty much in layman's terms. So definitely suggest that as well.
Yeah, that's a great one. I want to ask you both sort of I guess it's a personal observational question. You guys have worked with so many successful artists in your time and businesses. And I'm curious, what specific qualities have you observed in, really successful artists, both creatively and non-creatively, that you can share with us?
Yeah, I have a pretty big opinion on this one. And I think that creatives tend to, a lot of the calls that we get are creatives, obviously are creative. So they have a million ideas, they have a million visions, they have a million things they want to do. The most successful artists that we see are the ones that are able to hone in on one of those ideas and really execute. Because we have some artists right now that are massively talented, have, the potential to be top producers globally, but they have 3 projects that artist projects that they're working on. And because of that, their energy is split, their time is split. They're not able to fully encompass that persona. And so our advice always to, artists, and then also even to people on the business side of things as well, is to focus your energy in one place and really foster that, treat it like your baby, have it grow. And then once you have it in a place where you feel comfortable, you've built the fan base, you have a following, then, you can take a pivot. But I think it's when creatives get overly excited in the idea of things that we see some issues. And it even comes down to like the work that we're doing for clients. They'll have us start drafting sort of agreement because they want, this type of deal. And then all of a sudden the deal changes because they haven't fully thought it through. And it's really just trying to focus your energy.
Further to that, it's also not letting the business side of things like take the magic out of it for you, and like definitely educate yourself, like learn about it. But we've seen so many artists be in situations where they maybe like signed a bad deal in the beginning and got stuck in a situation that they weren't loving, and it kind of just drained them of all excitement and creativity. And I think that can definitely happen, and it's heartbreaking when that happens, and we hate to see it. So I think it's but we've seen many success stories that have come out on the other side of it and like figured out a way, whether it be through negotiation or whatever it may be, to kind of come out on the other side and like, rebrand, redo something and come out, no matter how many no's you get, just look for that one yes type of thing. And so I think just, staying strong through tough situations is also a great quality, and something that, it's not always easy for sure.
No, it's interesting. I remember last year in December, Eric and I had the pleasure of interviewing Clive Davis, and we asked him that question regarding his own career, and he said, you have to have resilience. You have to have grit. You have to have a very, very strong work ethic, in a time when nobody believes in you. And you're being fired, it's absolutely essential. And he says, it's hard to do. I used to work for Clive years ago, and he used to say, if all it took to have the career of like a Whitney Houston was just a great voice, he said, half the world would be, successful artists. Yeah. But he said it's maybe one of 10 qualities that you need, determination, grit, the drive, a strong work ethic, a commitment, a relentlessness. It's not at the expense, like you were saying, of your creativity, but there has to be that drive. And Eric and I always cite, Andy Gould, who's a renowned manager who managed Rob Zombie and many others for many years. He always had that famous expression, I can never want it more than you. And he used to talk about how when he would see that with a client, he said, there's nothing more heartbreaking when I would realize I wanted the success for my client more than they wanted it. He said it's absolutely heartbreaking because you cannot be the artist. You can't write the songs. You can't perform, and you have to let it go. And he said, he experienced that twice in his career, and he said it was the most heartbreaking thing he'd ever been through. After having such belief, but it's very interesting from that perspective.
I asked you guys earlier about, what legal steps, or not legal steps, but legal advice that they should or should not be doing. But this is more of a general, broader one for artists. What advice do you have for music artists who are committed to building a career in today's music industry?
That's a good one. So I think that setting yourself up with a foundation is really important. We kind of touched on this before, but making sure that you do have that business structure ready to go is definitely great, because then at least you don't have to worry about that. And then slowly building out the team and kind of setting yourself up is the advice that I would generally give. And of course, doing as much as you can yourself, because like you're saying, that's 100% true. No one can, even if you have the best team in the world and the best, management in the world, like they can't do it for you. So making sure to surround yourself with people that also believe in the vision and are aspiring and energized about the project is definitely what I would say, to look for as a developing artist, because it's going to keep that momentum and that drive going. And then the rest kind of comes in baby steps. And we say this too, like when artists come to us, it's like, there's 100 things that you could do. Like you could, make yourself all these agreement templates and do this. And that would set you up for sure. But you can also take it slowly and kind of like start out with, the major things. And then as you grow, you can add on and kind of, build out your brand, build out your foundation to the point where it's sustainable and there's options.
How do people reach you if they want to get in touch with your firm and perhaps do business or reach out? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. We have a very long firm name, but email is typically the best, and it would be info@schwartzschreiber.com. That's SCHWARTZSCHREIBER.com is absolutely the best way. We're constantly on our emails every single day.
Wonderful. We'll put that in, and we'll also put, the connection to the website and
Correct.
Everything in
the show notes.
In the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah.
We want to thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to do this.
Really excited to have you guys on the show.
Very exciting, and it's been very, very enlightening, and I think very, very necessary. I love that we're speaking to attorneys who are on the cutting edge of so much of this, who are working with artists who are doing very, very interesting kind of work in the areas that we've been talking about, as well as companies, labels you mentioned, publishers, sync companies that are also, because the laws and the outlines of business opportunities for them are changing just as much as they are for artists.
Yeah.
So we thank you so much for doing it.
And also, you guys are in my hometown, so any support that I can give to my hometown of Miami. So it's great to see you guys, tearing it up in Miami. Yeah.
I did notice that with the 305 number.
Yes, yes. 305 for life.
We're excited about the growth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really exploding down here, so we're very excited about it. And we appreciate you guys, too. It's unbelievable to see what you've done, and you've educated so many people, and we can just feel the passion. So we appreciate everything you're doing, and it's awesome.
Well, it's due to people like yourselves who are willing to take the time and the energy and come on and do this. We're only half the equation, and you guys are the other half. So we thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and information and commitment to artists. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an incredible conversation. I mean, I loved this conversation with Alexis and Brianna for many, many reasons. Number one, these are two attorneys that really get the reality of the music business in 2025.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
They get the market of today, and their philosophy, their thinking,
reflects
their outlook. Reflects that, exactly. Yeah. And I love that because they're not just doing a job, they're understanding the nature of the culture of music and the world that they're representing. One of the things that I thought was most interesting, specifically to their work, was how they discussed the evolving nature of deals. How, traditional contracts and revenue structures have evolved with streaming, and that there are no more traditional record contract deals. There's that artists today have to build their own communities, and how this very factor does affect the kinds of deals that they will and won't ask for. But having an understanding of that rather than just, traditional cookie cutter kinds of, records, publishing, merch, whatever, that each situation is different. And when we look at a lot of artists today who have those kinds of things, where is their strength? Why is the deal different for so-and-so? Well, the reason it's different is because this artist has built something very unique, and how they discussed those things I thought was very, very interesting and very astute as well.
Yeah, I agree. And also another area which I thought was really, there was a treasure trove. Anybody that's listening to this should go back and listen to this episode over again, because there were so many things that were discussed on here on so many levels that it's super important to go back and revisit. One of them was the shifts in fan monetization. Alexis noted that the importance for artists in building fan communities on platforms like Patreon and Discord provides leverage in negotiations. However, platforms are rapidly evolving, presenting a challenge in contractual language, especially regarding territories like the metaverse. These are all things that are everything is changing so quickly, and with the music business, it's rapidly changing. And I thought that this is an important area to discuss on the show, because you can't monetize really your music anymore. It's a lost leader. It's like walking into the old Best Buy, whoever goes into Best Buys these days, and you used to go and, when they were selling CDs or video games, you would go in there and look for that. But what they really wanted you to go into was to go buy the washing machine and the, refrigerator. That's what's called a lost leader. And so now our lost leader in this business is the music. It's just a given. It's free. I don't care what you're talking about. You're giving away that music, whether you're Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or whether you're Joe Blow on the sidewalk, you are giving away that music for free, basically. And so the idea of monetization in these other areas, such as platforms like Patreon and Discord, these are areas where you can really think about your different revenue streams and how you can monetize those and build other revenue streams, and how important that is going into negotiations with a major label or a major independent.
Absolutely. And to add what you're saying, they talk about how those new platforms that you mentioned, whether it's the whole thing of Meta or the whole thing of gaming or the whole thing of, Discord. These are new platforms that maybe right now in this, time aren't making a fortune, but they will.
Right.
Look at Roblox.
Right. Exactly. With the metaverse. The metaverse.
Look at these other platforms that have hundreds of thousands, millions,
which is part
fans.
Of Web 3.0, where you're seeing companies that are buying stakes into the metaverse. It's almost like virtual pieces of real estate.
Correct.
And that's what's been going on now for the last few years. It hasn't really it's here already, and there's a lot of people that are in that world, but it hasn't hit critical mass yet. We haven't gotten there yet. It's coming. Web 3.0, blockchain, and all of these other areas that we've talked about in this episode are things that have not come into the culture yet, but it's coming, and it's going to get there.
Absolutely, Eric. I couldn't agree more. And if you are a smart artist, which I know that all of you ladies and gentlemen out there are who are listening to this, you have to plan for the future. And guess what? The future is here.
Hey, Insiders. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.